License.
May I retrieve my wallet?
Fast enough to make people think traffic laws don't apply.
It's fast enough to deserve respect.
If everything checks out, you'll be free to go.
I only hope everyone gets verified before conclusions are made.
What kind of alert is that?
One I'm not authorized to discuss.
Who exactly are you?
Verify my identification first.
Ma'am, step away from the motorcycle and keep your hand where we can see them. The command cut through the late afternoon air like a siren, sharp enough to make every conversation at the busy Phoenix intersection fall silent. Heads turned. Cell phones rose almost instinctively. Drivers slowed, just enough to watch what looked like another routine traffic stop, but something about the woman beside the matte black Superbike made the moment feel strangely different. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply removed her helmet with deliberate care, revealing calm brown eyes that swept across the growing crowd before settling on the two officers standing several feet away. Her name was Naomi Brooks, 34 years old, a black woman enjoying the first real day off she'd had in nearly 3 months. The Arizona sun reflected across the polished fuel tank of her motorcycle, while warm desert wind carried the scent of hot asphalt and fresh coffee from a nearby corner cafe. 10 minutes earlier, she'd been thinking about nothing more complicated than the next stretch of open highway. Now red and blue lights painted long reflections across storefront windows as strangers whispered to each other, each quietly inventing a story before hearing a single fact. Officer Ethan Walker approached with measured confidence, his posture rigid, his expression already convinced he understood exactly what had happened. Behind him, Officer Ryan Collins remained several steps back, scanning traffic while occasionally glancing toward Naomi with visible uncertainty. Walker studied the motorcycle before looking directly at its rider. License. His tone left little room for conversation. Naomi nodded politely and reached toward the inside pocket of her riding jacket only after asking, "May I retrieve my wallet?" Walker answered with a short nod. Every movement she made remained slow, controlled, almost practiced. The leather gloves came off first, then the wallet, then her driver's license. She handed it over without hesitation. Walker barely glanced at it before shifting his attention back to the motorcycle. "Nice machine," he said flatly. "Fast enough to make people think. Traffic laws don't apply." Naomi offered the smallest hint of a smile. "It's fast enough to deserve respect." Walker didn't smile back. Around them, more people gathered on the sidewalk. A delivery driver leaned against his van. A couple walking their dog stopped near the crosswalk. Someone across the street quietly started recording with a phone held chest high. The atmosphere changed in subtle ways that couldn't quite be measured. Conversations softened. Curiosity replaced routine. Naomi noticed the cameras, but showed no reaction. She had learned years ago that crowds often reach conclusions long before truth had a chance to arrive. Walker circled the motorcycle once, examining every detail as though expecting to discover something hidden in plain sight. Collins finally stepped closer. "Dispatch hasn't confirmed anything unusual yet," he said quietly. Walker barely acknowledged him. His attention remained fixed on Naomi. "Mind explaining why witnesses reported a black sport bike accelerating through downtown?" Naomi answered with the same calm voice she had used from the beginning. "I'd be happy to help however I can. I only ask that you verify my identification before making any assumptions." Walker's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "We'll decide what needs verifying." The words lingered between them longer than either expected. Naomi lowered her eyes for only a second, breathing steadily while the desert wind tugged gently at a loose strand of hair escaping beneath her helmet liner. She neither protested nor attempted to leave. She simply waited, patient enough to let silence reveal what emotion never could. Across the intersection, another phone lifted into the air. The recording had already begun, but no one watching could possibly imagine that the next few minutes would transform an ordinary Saturday traffic stop into a story none of them would ever forget. Before we continue, if you enjoy powerful stories that reveal the strength of the human spirit, and the choices that shape our lives, subscribe to Narralight. Every story has a lesson. Every choice has a consequence. And sometimes the smallest moment changes everything. Now, let's see what happens next. Officer Ryan Collins glanced from Naomi to the driver's license still resting in Ethan Walker's hand, then back toward the motorcycle parked neatly beside the curb. Nothing about the scene matched the reckless image described moments earlier over the radio. The engine had already cooled enough that waves of heat no longer shimmered above the exhaust, and the tires carried none of the fresh rubber marks usually left by aggressive riding. Even the surrounding traffic cameras mounted above the intersection blinked silently, recording every second without emotion or opinion. Walker, however, seemed uninterested in details that complicated his first impression. He folded his arms and looked directly at Naomi. "You said we should verify your identification." Naomi nodded once. "Yes, sir. That is all I have asked from the beginning." Her voice remained steady, neither defensive nor impatient. It carried the calm confidence of someone accustomed to remaining composed when everyone else expected panic. Walker handed the license to Collins without taking his eyes off her. "Run everything," he said. Collins stepped toward the patrol vehicle, speaking quietly into the radio while entering the information into the mobile computer. Naomi remained exactly where she had been instructed, her helmet resting lightly against her hip, the afternoon sunlight reflecting softly across its dark visor. A little girl standing beside her father pointed toward the motorcycle and whispered something that made him smile before gently reminding her not to stare. Nearby, another bystander lowered his phone for a moment. "She has been respectful this whole time," he quietly remarked to no one in particular. No one answered. The silence felt heavier than before. Walker slowly walked another circle around the motorcycle, stopping near the rear license plate. "Expensive bike," he observed. "Not exactly what most people expect." Naomi met his eyes without hesitation. People expect many things before they know the truth. The words lingered between them. Walker looked away first. Seconds later, Collins returned carrying a puzzled expression instead of certainty. "The system is taking longer than usual," he admitted. "There is a verification delay." Walker frowned. Meaning I cannot complete the return yet." Walker sighed impatiently. "Then keep checking." Collins nodded and walked back toward the patrol car. Naomi watched neither officer. Instead, she lifted her face slightly toward the bright Arizona sky, taking one slow breath as warm desert air drifted across the intersection. Her weekend ride had been planned down to the mile. 240 miles through open highways, mountain curves, and quiet desert roads before sunset. She had promised herself one uninterrupted day without briefings, encrypted calls, or endless reports. For the first time in weeks, she had wanted to feel anonymous. Just another rider enjoying the road. That quiet hope now seemed farther away with every passing minute. A delivery truck rolled through the green light while traffic cautiously flowed around the stopped patrol cars. Drivers looked over, curious for only a few seconds before continuing toward their destinations. To them, it was another roadside stop. To Naomi, it was becoming something much more important. She understood better than anyone how quickly assumptions could shape public perception long before facts appeared. Walker finally spoke again. "If everything checks out, you will be free to go." Naomi answered politely. "I appreciate that." Then she paused before adding, "I only hope everyone receives the same opportunity to be fully verified before conclusions are made." Walker offered no reply. Across the street, another patrol vehicle slowly approached the intersection after hearing routine radio traffic. Its arrival drew a few more curious glances from pedestrians. Collins suddenly looked up from the computer screen, his expression growing noticeably more serious as another notification quietly appeared, one that neither he nor Walker had expected to see. He stared at the display for several silent seconds before reaching once more for the radio microphone. Collins hesitated before pressing the transmit button, reading the notification twice to make certain he had not misunderstood it. The message was brief, heavily restricted, and unlike anything that normally appeared during an ordinary traffic stop. Instead of displaying complete information, the screen instructed the responding officer to contact a secured federal verification line immediately. Collins looked toward Walker. "I have never seen this response before," he admitted quietly. Walker stepped closer, glanced at the monitor for only a second, and shook his head. "It is probably just a system error. Call anyway." Collins reached for the radio while Naomi remained perfectly still beside her motorcycle. She did not interrupt. She did not attempt to explain what the notification meant. She simply watched the afternoon shadows grow longer across the pavement as another warm breeze carried dust gently through the intersection. Years of experience had taught her that truth rarely arrived with dramatic speeches. More often, it arrived through quiet patience. The dispatcher answered almost immediately, but Collins noticed something unusual. Instead of the relaxed tone common during routine calls, the voice became noticeably more formal after he read the verification code from Naomi's identification. "Stand by," the dispatcher replied. "Do not continue processing. A secure verification specialist is joining this call." Collins instinctively lowered the radio slightly and exchanged another uncertain glance with Walker. Around them, the crowd continued growing. Some people assumed the delay meant officers had discovered something serious. Others quietly defended Naomi, pointing out that she had remained respectful from the beginning. Two very different stories were beginning to spread across the same sidewalk, neither supported by complete facts. Walker folded his arms once again. "This should not take this long," Naomi answered gently. "Sometimes important information requires careful handling." Walker gave no response. The words seemed to irritate him more than reassure him. Across the street, sunlight reflected off the glass windows of an office building, filling the intersection with bright flashes of gold that contrasted sharply with the blue emergency lights still turning in slow, steady circles. Collins lifted the radio again as a new voice entered the conversation. "Calm, professional, deliberate. Officer Collins, please confirm the full identification number exactly as printed." Collins complied. Several seconds passed. No one spoke. Even the background chatter from passing traffic seemed strangely distant. Finally, the specialist replied, "Identification confirmed. Hold your current position. Do not disclose protected employment status over an unsecured channel. A supervisory contact is being notified." Collins blinked. Protected employment status? The line immediately returned to silence. Walker extended his hand. "Let me hear that." Collins reluctantly passed him the radio. "There has to be a mistake," Walker muttered before requesting clarification himself. The answer never came. Instead, the dispatcher repeated the same instruction. "Wait for supervisory guidance." Naomi quietly watched the exchange without the slightest sign of satisfaction. She had experienced moments like this before, moments when confidential work unexpectedly intersected with ordinary life. Most people imagined federal investigations as constant excitement, but the reality usually demanded restraint, discipline, and the willingness to let procedures unfold without interference. She had promised herself long ago that she would never use her position to win arguments or demand special treatment. Respect meant very little if it depended on revealing a title. A faint vibration suddenly echoed from inside the secured storage compartment attached to her motorcycle. Walker noticed it immediately. "What was that?" Naomi answered honestly. "Probably a scheduled alert. Can you open it?" Walker asked. Naomi looked directly at him. "Not without your permission." The answer caught him off guard. For the first time since the stop began, uncertainty replaced confidence across his face. Before he could respond, another patrol vehicle pulled quietly to the curb. This one carried a supervising sergeant whose expression suggested he had received far more information than anyone else standing at the intersection. Sergeant Daniel Harper stepped out of the newly arrived patrol vehicle with measured confidence instead of urgency, closing the driver's door quietly behind him as if he already understood that the loudest voice at the scene would not reveal the truth any faster. He greeted neither the crowd nor the officers immediately. Instead, his eyes moved from the patrol cars to the parked Superbike, then finally rested on Naomi Brooks. She stood exactly where she had been minutes earlier, shoulders relaxed, hands visible, her riding helmet still resting against her side. Nothing about her posture suggested resistance. Nothing suggested panic. Harper turned toward Officer Ethan Walker. "Bring me up to speed." Walker summarized the situation quickly, emphasizing the speeding report, the delayed verification, and the unusual federal response. Harper listened without interruption, then asked one simple question. Has she refused any lawful instruction? Walker hesitated. No. Has she been disrespectful? Another pause. No, sir. Harper nodded once before facing Naomi. Ma'am, thank you for remaining cooperative. Naomi answered with the same calm courtesy she had shown since the first flashing lights appeared behind her. Thank you, Sergeant. The exchange lasted only seconds, but several people watching from the sidewalk quietly lowered their phones, surprised by the change in tone. Collins remained beside the patrol vehicle, studying the secured message that continued flashing across the computer screen. Every few moments, another encrypted notification appeared, each repeating the same instruction. Await supervisory contact. Do not proceed beyond standard safety measures. Harper walked slowly around the motorcycle without touching it. The machine reflected the Arizona sun like polished obsidian, its engine now completely silent after sitting motionless for nearly 20 minutes. Beautiful motorcycle, Harper observed. Naomi smiled politely. It has taken me across 12 states. Today was supposed to be another peaceful ride. The words carried no accusation, only quiet disappointment. Walker shifted impatiently. Sergeant, with respect, we still have not confirmed exactly who she is. Harper looked at him carefully. And until we do, assumptions are not evidence. The sentence hung in the warm afternoon air, like a reminder every officer present understood, even if not everyone welcomed hearing it. A secure government sedan rolled slowly into a nearby parking lot across the intersection before stopping without emergency lights. No one stepped out. The vehicle simply waited. Collins noticed at first, but said nothing. At almost the same moment, the vibration echoed once again from the secured compartment mounted behind Naomi's seat. This time it lasted several seconds before stopping. Walker looked immediately toward the storage case. That is twice now. Naomi nodded. Yes, sir. You still believe it is an alert? Yes. What kind of alert? Naomi met his eyes calmly. One I am not authorized to discuss unless properly verified. Harper watched both of them in silence. He could see frustration growing in Walker, but he also recognized something else. Naomi had never once attempted to exploit confidential information, demand special treatment, or pressure anyone with claims about her background. She had followed every instruction despite the growing inconvenience. That detail mattered. The secure radio on Harper's shoulder suddenly emitted a short, encrypted tone unlike the department's normal dispatch traffic. He stepped several feet away before answering. The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds. No one else could hear the voice on the other end. When Harper returned, his expression had changed almost imperceptibly. He looked first at Naomi, then at Walker, then toward the unmarked government sedan waiting quietly across the street. Officer Walker, he said evenly, from this point forward, every decision we make must follow procedure with absolute precision. Walker frowned. Did they finally tell you who she is? Harper held his gaze for a brief moment before answering. They told me enough to know that this situation is far more important than any of us realized when those emergency lights first came on. Before we continue, if you enjoy inspiring stories about courage, second chances, and people who choose kindness when it matters most, subscribe to Narralight. Our stories remind us that one decision, one voice, or one act of compassion can change a life forever. Now, let's see what happened next. Walker stared at Sergeant Harper for several long seconds, searching his face for an explanation that never came. The words were clear enough to change the atmosphere, yet vague enough to leave every unanswered question hanging in the warm desert air. Around them, the growing crowd sensed that something significant had shifted. Conversations became quieter. Even the people recording with their phones lowered them slightly, waiting for whatever came next. Harper turned calmly toward Naomi. Ma'am, I appreciate your patience. She nodded. I understand everyone here is trying to do their job. Her answer carried no sarcasm, no resentment, only simple professionalism. Collins looked down as another encrypted notification appeared on the patrol computer. This one was different. A digital timer began counting down beside a short instruction reminding officers not to interfere with pending federal communications. Collins swallowed quietly before looking toward Harper again. Sergeant, I think they are expecting someone to arrive. Harper acknowledged him with a slight nod, but kept his attention on Naomi. Is there anything you need while we wait? Only permission to remain beside my motorcycle, she replied. There is equipment inside the secured compartment that automatically checks in at scheduled intervals. If it misses enough responses, other people may begin asking questions. Walker immediately stepped forward. What kind of equipment? Naomi answered carefully. Equipment that does not belong to me personally. The response was truthful without revealing protected information. Harper understood exactly what she was doing. She was honoring confidentiality even while standing in the middle of a public intersection. That discipline impressed him more than any title ever could. Another soft vibration echoed from the storage compartment before fading away. Walker looked from the compartment to Naomi, then toward the unmarked government sedan still waiting across the street. For the first time since initiating the stop, uncertainty outweighed confidence. He replayed the last half hour in his mind, remembering every assumption he had made before all the facts were available. Across the intersection, a young boy tugged gently on his mother's sleeve. Is she in trouble? He whispered. His mother looked toward Naomi, who remained calm despite the attention surrounding her. I do not know, she answered honestly. Sometimes grown-ups have to wait for the truth too. The words drifted through the quiet afternoon without anyone nearby realizing how accurately they described the entire situation. Harper's radio sounded again. This time the message was short and unmistakable. Federal representatives arriving in approximately 3 minutes. Walker heard enough to recognize the phrase. His shoulders stiffened. Federal. Harper looked directly at him. Yes. Walker took one slow breath. Sir, should we release her? Harper did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Naomi. She still stood exactly where she had stood from the very beginning, never once attempting to leave despite having several opportunities to do so. No, Harper finally said. We will simply continue following procedure until verification is complete. Naomi offered a respectful nod. That is exactly what I would recommend. The simple statement landed differently now. Earlier it had sounded like a request. Now it sounded like quiet wisdom. Collins suddenly noticed the government sedan across the street beginning to move. It rolled slowly through the intersection before stopping directly behind the patrol vehicles without activating emergency lights. 2 professionally dressed individuals stepped out, carrying no visible urgency, only quiet purpose. Neither displayed dramatic authority. Neither rushed. They simply walked towards Sergeant Harper with small credential wallets already in hand. Walker instinctively straightened his posture while Collins silently stepped back to give them room. One of the visitors greeted Harper by name before speaking in a calm voice that only the officers could hear. Harper listened carefully, then glanced once toward Naomi. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. The visitor finally turned toward Naomi and smiled with familiar recognition. Agent Brooks, he said warmly, we have been trying to reach you for the last several minutes. Your team has been waiting for your scheduled status confirmation. The words settled over the intersection with a quiet weight that no flashing emergency light could match. Agent Brooks, we have been trying to reach you for the last several minutes. Your team has been waiting for your scheduled status confirmation. Nobody answered immediately. Even the steady hum of passing traffic seemed to fade into the background as I turned toward Naomi. She looked at the federal representative with the same composed expression she had worn since the first patrol car pulled in behind her. I apologize for the delay, she said calmly. I was cooperating with the officers. The representative nodded with genuine understanding. We know. Your secure beacon stopped responding, so protocol required us to verify your status. He turned towards Sergeant Harper before presenting official credentials. Harper examined them carefully, then handed them back with a respectful nod. "Verification confirmed," he said quietly. Walker felt the words settle heavily in his chest. Until that moment, every decision had seemed straightforward. Now each assumption replayed itself with uncomfortable clarity. He remembered dismissing Naomi's request to verify her identification first. He remembered believing confidence was the same thing as certainty. Most of all, he remembered how calm she had remained while everyone else grew more impatient. The federal representative continued speaking in an even tone. "Agent Brooks is currently assigned to a protected investigative unit. We cannot discuss operational details, but we can confirm her identity and that she has fully cooperated throughout this encounter." Collins lowered his eyes for a brief moment. Relief mixed with embarrassment crossed his face. He quietly realized that the most professional person at the entire scene had been the woman who had spent nearly an hour waiting without complaint. Harper looked toward Naomi. "Ma'am, on behalf of my department, thank you for your patience." Naomi offered a gentle smile. "Sergeant, every profession carries responsibility. Mine is no different from yours. Procedures matter because they protect everyone when they are followed carefully." Her answer surprised several people standing nearby. No accusation, no demand for recognition, no attempt to embarrass anyone. Just a reminder that professionalism belonged to character, not titles. The afternoon sun hung lower above the Phoenix skyline, casting long golden reflections across the polished pavement. The red and blue lights that had dominated the intersection now seemed almost unnecessary beneath the quiet calm, replacing earlier tension. Several bystanders slowly lowered their phones. A few exchanged thoughtful glances before walking away without saying a word. The story they expected to record had become something entirely different. Walker stepped forward, his voice noticeably softer than before. "Agent Brooks." He paused, searching for the right words. "You knew this verification would eventually happen." Naomi nodded once. "Yes. Then why did you never tell us who you were?" She looked toward the highway stretching beyond the intersection before answering. "Because I wanted to be treated like any other citizen until the facts spoke for themselves. Respect that depends on a badge is temporary. Respect built on fairness lasts much longer." No one interrupted her. Collins quietly removed the temporary hold notice from beside the motorcycle, while Harper thanked the federal representatives for their cooperation. A warm breeze moved gently through the intersection, carrying away the last traces of tension that had lingered all afternoon. The representative reached into his jacket and handed Naomi a secured communication device that had been waiting inside the government vehicle. "Your team has already adjusted the schedule," he said. "Everything is under control." Naomi accepted it with a grateful nod. "Thank you." For a long moment, no one moved. There was only the sound of wind brushing across the desert road, distant traffic continuing its ordinary rhythm, and a silence that somehow said more than any argument ever could. Officer Ethan Walker remained standing beside the patrol car long after the formal verification had ended, watching Naomi Brooks secure the communication device inside the locked compartment of her motorcycle with the same quiet precision she had shown throughout the afternoon. The intersection slowly returned to its normal rhythm. Engines rolled through green lights. Pedestrians resumed conversations. The curious crowd dissolved one small group at a time, leaving behind only fading tire noise and long shadows stretching across the warm pavement. Yet for Walker, nothing felt ordinary anymore. He replayed every decision in his mind, recognizing how quickly confidence had become assumption and how easily assumption had almost become lasting judgment. Sergeant Harper quietly signed the final paperwork before walking toward the federal representatives. They exchanged a few professional words that remained private, then shook hands before the representatives returned to the unmarked sedan. As the vehicle disappeared into afternoon traffic, Harper turned back toward his officers. "This situation will be documented exactly as it happened," he said evenly. "Facts matter. Procedures matter even more." Collins nodded immediately. "Walker, answered more slowly. Yes, sir. Harper studied him for a moment before adding, making a mistake is not the end of a career. Refusing to learn from one can be. Those words stayed suspended between them long after Harper walked away to finish his report. Naomi adjusted the zipper of her riding jacket and carefully fastened her helmet beneath one arm instead of putting it on. She noticed Walker approaching, but remained still, allowing him to choose his words without pressure. He stopped several feet away, maintaining respectful distance. Agent Brooks, he began quietly, I owe you an apology. Naomi listened without interrupting. Walker took a slow breath before continuing. I believed I had already figured out who you were before I had all the facts. You repeatedly asked for your identification to be verified, and I failed to give that request the attention it deserved. That was my responsibility, and I did not handle it as well as I should have. The sincerity in his voice left no room for performance. Collins stood nearby, silently witnessing the conversation. Naomi looked at Walker with calm, understanding rather than triumph. Officer Walker, every person wearing a uniform carries two responsibilities. The first is enforcing the law. The second is protecting the dignity of the people standing in front of them while doing it. The second responsibility is often the harder one. Walker lowered his eyes briefly. You are right. Naomi smiled gently. Today could have ended with anger. I am grateful it ended with understanding instead. Collins finally spoke for the first time in several minutes. May I ask you something? Naomi nodded. Of course. Collins hesitated before asking. When you realized federal verification would eventually identify you, were you ever tempted to reveal your position immediately? Naomi glanced toward the open highway where sunlight shimmered above the distant asphalt. More than once, she admitted honestly. But if I expect every citizen to trust fair procedures, then I have to trust those same procedures myself. Otherwise, they become privileges instead of principles. Neither officer answered immediately. The lesson landed with quiet force because it came without accusation. Harper returned, carrying a completed incident form. Agent Brooks, this document confirms the stop has concluded and your property remains in your possession. Naomi accepted it with a grateful nod. Thank you, Sergeant. Harper smiled faintly. Safe travels. As Naomi slipped the folded document into her jacket pocket, Walker noticed something simple that stayed with him more than the federal credentials or the unmarked sedan ever would. Throughout the entire encounter, she had never asked anyone to remember her title. She had only asked them to remember the importance of verifying the truth before deciding who someone was. That quiet request echoed far beyond the intersection, leaving behind a lesson none of them would soon forget. Naomi slipped on her riding gloves one careful finger at a time, not because she was eager to leave, but because she believed every ending deserved the same dignity as every beginning. The afternoon sun had softened into a warm amber glow that stretched across the Phoenix intersection, turning the polished chrome of her motorcycle into a mirror reflecting the quiet faces around her. Most of the bystanders had already gone home, carrying with them a story very different from the one they thought they were about to witness. A few remained near the sidewalk, speaking in hushed voices, no longer interested in speculation, but in reflection. Sergeant Harper walked over one final time, extending his hand. Naomi accepted it with a firm but gentle handshake. Thank you for your professionalism today, Harper said sincerely. There will be a complete internal review of every decision made during this stop. That review is not about punishment. It is about making certain we learn from what happened. Naomi nodded. That is how trust grows, not by pretending mistakes never happen, but by choosing to improve after they do. Harper smiled quietly. I wish more people understood that. A few feet away, Officer Ryan Collins approached carrying the temporary incident paperwork that had already been finalized. Everything has been cleared, he said. There are no outstanding issues. Naomi accepted the document with appreciation before placing it inside her jacket. Thank you, Officer Collins. He hesitated before speaking again. I hope one day I can handle situations with the same patience you showed today. Naomi looked at him kindly. Patience is easier when you remember that every person you meet is carrying a story you cannot see. Collins lowered his eyes thoughtfully. Walker remained standing near the front of the patrol vehicle, watching the exchange from a distance. After several quiet moments, he stepped forward one last time. "Agent Brooks," he said, "I know an apology cannot erase a first impression, but I hope it can become the beginning of a better one." Naomi considered his words carefully before answering. "Officer Walker, people are remembered less for the mistakes they make than for what they choose to do after recognizing them. Today you chose to listen. Do not stop doing that tomorrow." Walker gave a slow nod, understanding that the conversation had become larger than either of them. It was no longer about a traffic stop. It was about the responsibility carried by every person trusted with authority. The desert breeze drifted gently across the road, carrying away the last traces of heat from the pavement as evening settled over the city. Naomi placed her helmet on, secured the strap beneath her chin, and swung onto the motorcycle with the smooth confidence of someone returning to a familiar journey rather than escaping an unpleasant one. She started the engine, and its steady rumble blended naturally with the sound of passing traffic. Before easing onto the highway, she lifted one hand in a simple gesture of farewell. Harper returned the wave. Collins smiled quietly. Walker raised his hand as well, this time not as an officer directing someone to stop, but as one professional acknowledging another with genuine respect. Shades of orange and blue, each passing mile carrying away the weight of a day she had never expected to remember. She rode at a steady pace, not trying to outrun what had happened, but allowing the quiet rhythm of the engine and the open landscape to restore the peace she had set out to find that morning. Inside her helmet, there was only the sound of her own breathing, the soft rush of wind, and the comforting certainty that integrity had spoken louder than anger ever could. Back at the precinct, Sergeant Daniel Harper gathered his officers before ending the evening shift. The incident report lay open across the conference table, every timeline carefully documented, every decision recorded exactly as it had occurred. Harper looked around the room before speaking. Today reminded us that professionalism is measured before identities are revealed, not afterward. Every citizen deserves the same careful process regardless of appearance, occupation, or first impressions. No one interrupted. Officer Ryan Collins quietly nodded, already recognizing how the experience had reshaped the way he would approach every future encounter. Officer Ethan Walker remained silent for several moments before finally speaking. "I believe confidence meant making quick decisions. Today I learned that confidence without verification is only assumption." Harper met his eyes and answered simply. Then today was not a failure. It was a lesson. Weeks passed, and the intersection where everything had unfolded returned to ordinary life. Thousands of cars crossed those same lanes every day. People hurried to work, picked up groceries, walked their dogs, and continued living without knowing that one quiet afternoon had permanently changed the outlook of several people who served their community. Department training sessions soon began, including a new discussion built around the importance of verification, communication, and treating every individual with equal dignity from the very first interaction. No names were shared publicly. No dramatic headlines appeared. The value of the lesson did not depend on recognition. It depended on remembrance. Naomi never spoke publicly about what had happened. Either. When colleagues occasionally mentioned the delay that afternoon, she simply smiled and changed the subject. She believed that true professionalism did not seek applause after doing the right thing. It quietly prepared itself to do the right thing again tomorrow. One cool Saturday morning, several months later, she found herself riding through the same stretch of Arizona highway. The desert looked almost identical. The mountains stood unchanged against the horizon. The air carried the familiar scent of warm earth and distant rain. As she approached the intersection where everything had begun, she noticed a patrol vehicle parked near the shoulder. Officer Walker stood beside it, assisting an elderly couple whose vehicle had developed mechanical trouble. There were no flashing lights, no crowd, no tensión, only patience. Walker smiled politely while helping them contact roadside assistance before noticing Naomi waiting briefly at the traffic light. Their eyes met for only a second. He lifted one hand in a simple greeting. Naomi returned the gesture with a warm nod before the light turned green. Neither spoke. No words were necessary anymore. Sometimes the deepest apologies were proven through changed actions rather than repeated sentences. Naomi continued toward the open highway as morning sunlight reflected across her windshield, disappearing once again into the endless ribbon of road ahead. Behind her, the city continued waking to another ordinary day. Ahead of her, the horizon remained wide open, quietly reminding anyone willing to notice that justice is strongest when guided by humility. Respect begins long before titles are known, and the greatest measure of character is not the authority someone possesses, but the fairness they choose to show every person they meet.